The following is a conversation with Polo Lam. Polo is the founder of Deseo VR, which is a company which specialise in offering 360-degree virtual reality tours for schools. In the conversation, which was very wide-ranging, we focus on the technical requirements for setting up VR within a school or a college, but we also focus on some of the more moral and ethical implications of this blurring between the real and the virtual. And at the end of the conversation, we then touch upon the future of education, what his thoughts are on the way things are heading. It's a really interesting discussion, and I hope you enjoy it.
Polo, it's really great to see. Great to have you on the podcast. On the second of the EducAIte podcasts, it's really exciting to be able to talk to you about something I have to say I don't know a huge amount about virtual reality, but really keen to know more. So what I'm quite keen for you to do initially, Polo, is maybe just to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your company, and then we can really get into the meat of, talking about where we are with virtual reality, where you think things are going, and how all of that applies to the world of education.
Of course. Thank you so much, Darren, for having me on your podcast. My name is Polo Lam. I am the founder of Deseo VR. Originally, I'm from Hong Kong. I studied in England for 13 years, so I went to boarding school up in the north, in Yorkshire and the Lake District. And then as I finished university, I moved to Spain. So now I'm actually living in Tenerife. Long story. But yeah, this is a short summary of me and what I'm doing, which is this VR. Obviously, we're going to talk about virtual reality and the technology implications for education, especially because we feel like this technology is going to be huge. It is already huge. For education. So yeah, this is a short intro.
Thank you. So what got you into VR? What was the journey into getting into VR, and particularly what you do at the moment, which is essentially, I believe, kind of virtual reality tours and 360 experiences to kind of market, particularly schools, but any businesses.
Exactly. So it was a coincidence. I feel like it's probably destiny. So ever since I was young, I've always wanted to create something that would impact the world. And then I found business. I started studying business in A-levels. And that got me thinking, okay, so maybe one day I would love to be able to build my own business. That way I could really influence the surroundings, the people around me. And then during my university, which of course I studied business as well, I had the opportunity to do an internship with one of my friends' neighbors who happened to create his own startup at that point. So I asked him, can I do my internship with you? And that was in Madrid. And this company happened to be a VR startup. So that was 6 years ago when everything started. The VR industry started to, it's very much like the metaverse right now, where everyone started talking about it, or blockchain or crypto, like 1 year ago, when everyone started talking about it. It was around that point where, okay, VR has always existed, but suddenly some kind of technology advancement happened and everyone started talking about it. So these people created this company in Madrid, and I said, okay, let's do an internship on that. And that's how I got into VR and started learning about VR. And as soon as I got my first VR experience with one of these chunkier headsets, because obviously times 6 years, from then it's advanced from now. There was huge chunky headsets, and it was all plugged into computers. We had something called a lighthouse, if I recall well, where basically the cameras, trackers, and they're huge poles in like an empty room where it's tracking your headsets. As soon as I put on that headset, I thought, wow, this is gonna really change the world. This is exactly what I want to be involved in. And that's how I started Deseo VR, and I thought this must be the first. I mean, it might not be the last, but it's definitely the first company I want to create to see how much impact I could create in the world.
So, okay, talk me through. I'm let's say I own schools, I run schools, and I want to use your service, your sort of innovative solution. Talk me through what does it mean? What does a VR experience mean when it comes to, say, let's just use schools as an example. When what are you wanting to market the school? How does your kind of VR experience work?
Okay, so as you mentioned at the beginning, where I do two things. It's very basic. I do two things. One of them are virtual tools, and the other one is a VR experience. So let's start with the VR experience. So to understand why we even sell VR experiences to school, it's the fact that VR is an empathy machine. So essentially, it's a communication tool. It's like a laptop. It's like your mobile phone. VR is just another type of communication tool. What's special about it? Well, the empathy part of it. So instead of you passively consuming a video, a typical education video where there's a student or a teacher being interviewed talking about their wonderful things about the school, the great thing about VR is that it puts their audience, who are future parents, future students who might be interested to study at the school, it puts them in the center of this content. So they become part of the content. So the VR experiences that we sell in the hopes of we want to get the future students and parents into the school without them ever having to actually go to the school, and understand already with a 1 or 2 minute kind of trailer of what is it like to be at the school for one day. So that's how we getting schools to think about, okay, there's a new type of technology. This is how we can actually transmit the same message that we've been trying to transmit, but in a better way, because there's no better way than you actually being there and experiencing it. So now videos are great, but they don't make you feel like you're already there. So that's the empathy part, and that's why schools have can take advantage of this tool to be able to communicate better to the future audience, whoever they are. It might not even be parents or students, because it could be an investor who's trying to understand what your school is all about. You know, they're not going to understand it in one Zoom meeting. It's impossible. They have to, you know, you can tell them about all the wonderful thing, but until they see it and experience it for themselves, they're not going to be impacted as hugely as watching somebody talk. I mean, you're not going to interview your teacher and they're going to talk rubbish about your school. So it's better to see how really wonderful a certain activity or event or just a class, even a normal class, what is it really like to be at a class, and say, okay, now I understand. So that's what we're trying to achieve. We help schools to break that communication gap with whoever they're trying to speak to.
I really like that notion of an empathy machine, and I've not really considered that before. I think that's a really interesting way of framing the VR experience. Could you maybe drill down a little bit more into that? So you talk about empathy, about, you know, the being centered in the experience, being kind of located in the middle of the experience, being literally able to look around you and see. In what way does that generate empathy that maybe watching a video, a YouTube video, possibly doesn't? I'm quite keen to understand maybe some of the psychology behind placing someone within an experience and how that potentially generates empathy.
To answer that question, I can refer to my experience, or even our experience of maybe like traveling or living in a country. So you know how we, you know, if we travel somewhere, I don't know, say to Spain, And then we go back home and we try to tell our friends, we try to tell our families, all these wonderful things that we have done. You obviously show them photos or videos that you took, and it transmits the message, but you never quite understand it. You only see an angle. Whether it's a photo or video, you always see a glimpse of that wonderful beach that you're on, or that wonderful hotel that you were in, or that museum, or whatever that experience you were experiencing. So it's the same experience where you really want to communicate that journey that you've been through using the traditional videos and photo method. But deep down that they don't really get it, because you say, okay, so next time you come with me, that way you can actually understand. So that's where we know that VR is so powerful, because VR is the only machine right now. Okay, in the future there might be other things, but VR right now is the only communication tool that allows you to transport your parents, your family, your friends to your holiday destination that you've been. So then they're like, oh, okay, now I get it. I get that all the perspective, So that really will impact anyone that uses a VR headset. And anyways, VR is for somebody for you to try. Like I can talk about it all day long, but until you put your first headset, you're not gonna understand. It's one of these things that it's 100% show and tell little. Like you cannot tell anyone about how wonderful VR. You have to really try it for yourself. As I told you, as I mentioned before, that when I tried my first VR experience, I was absolutely gobsmacked. I think we did zombies. We played a zombie game at the office, and I was shocked. I was like, wow, like from never having touched something like that, because that was at the beginning of VR for most people, to be able to shoot zombies and zombies are coming at you. That's another level of immersion, of empathy. Like you're not gonna understand that. You can watch whatever video, film you want about zombies, but being chased by zombie in that virtual world, and it's coming after you from the front and from behind simultaneously. It's not a 2D version, it's a 3D version. You look back and it's coming at you as well. So that level of immersiveness you cannot get from a video nor a photo. Like it's impossible. So when going back to your question of the psychological impact, it's obvious. We're human. The human being loves experiencing, and the only way to experience is to be there. That's it. Like you have to be there to understand truly what it's all about, and that's what VR brings to the table right now.
I understand this idea of being immersed, of full immersion, and the idea of, if I'm at some tourist destination, I can see the church, the cathedral, but I can also, I assume, hear, as I'm physically looking around, I can hear the people around me, and as I change where I'm moving my head, the auditory experience changes as well. So this notion of being fully immersed, that I can see how that can create that empathy, that kind of understanding of the situation that you're in.
100%. That's the next step. That's the next step, because obviously the visual one is obvious. People can see it like straight away. If imagine I'm selling this product to you, and the first thing they're gonna ask is, okay, so is it gonna be as immersive looking at the thing compared to a 2D normal video or photo? Then you say, okay, yes. And then from then on, you might add the audio, the 3D audio, which is another level. It's a huge production if you have to try and sync the audio whilst you try to get the footage at the same time. So yeah, the audio 100%. As you were explaining, you can get closer to one side of the video, and you should be able to hear it from the left ear instead of the right more. And this really adds to the audio. The only thing is, it's still improving, and that's not the first thing people even ask you, because they know that the technology needs time to build. And we can imagine, we were talking about Adobe AI technology just before we started this podcast. I can imagine somebody already working to integrate AI into this technology, where we can be filming, and in real time it's making this audio better using AI. So these little things are just going to improve the experience. So with the visual and the audio, which are the two, you would say, most important senses that we need in order to create that empathy part of the experience, is only going to grow from here to, well, I don't know, 50 years. It's only going to get better. Not to mention, we can have an extended talk about this, because whilst I was doing my internship, people were already creating haptics. Have you ever heard of like the haptics?
Yeah. I wanted to talk about that actually. So yeah, please carry on. I think this is because that adds another sense into the mix.
Exactly. So you have the visual, now we have the audio. It's all great and not. And then you think, okay, what if you can start smelling? That's crazy. If you think of smelling the Spanish streets, with tapas or the paella or whatever it is. What if you can start smelling? Imagine, you can see, you can hear the Spanish people speaking, but like in 3D, and then you can even smell it. You can smell the food. That adds another layer to your experience. And then to go one step further, imagine you can actually start touching the building, the Sagrada Familia. You can get like a little feel of the walls of that particular museum or church or whatever it is. Then you wear gloves, and then it was, I don't know, somehow it's connected to your headset or your brain. I don't know. It's being invented as we speak, but it's not quite there yet, obviously, because it's not in the mass market, but it already exists. So it's more for games right now, I would say. So people would say, okay, like Call of Duty, for example, where instead of hearing only the shooting, your character going, oh, you actually feel the bullets. Imagine that. You're running in the field and you feel the bullets hit you. Even though it won't hurt you, you can feel it through a bodysuit. So that adds another layer to your experience. And slowly, this would obviously become more common. It won't just be for games, and then it could be for education. It could be for training. It could be for many things that I can't even think of right now, probably. Or maybe, I don't know, marketing for restaurants. You can already smell the food before you enter the restaurant. Imagine that. So yeah, that's another podcast for when all these things comes up. I think it will be sped up with AI. To be honest, I think you have to speed a lot of things up.
One of the beauties of the space that we find ourselves in is that it is changing on a daily basis. In the groups that we're part of, LinkedIn and various other, the feeds that I listen to, and the podcasts and the TikTok videos, and I mean, it's just, it's changing so quickly. There is literally every single day something new to talk about, to think about, apply into your own business or your own sector. It's utterly fascinating, and I think we're all kind of part fascinated, part terrified by where things are going. I just wanted a few just things to pick up on. I guess one of the questions that I have is one over access, because we talk a lot with technology about, access to technology, and that the more technology advances, the more sophisticated the technology becomes, both in terms of the software and the hardware, the more potential that has of creating what we call a digital divide, those who can access and those that can't access. And my one question to you over particularly your business and the way you run your business. So we'll come on to a moment into the capture. I'm quite interested in the mechanisms by which you capture this footage. But when it comes to your clients and they have this immersive experience, how do they access and how do not just the clients but also the people that they are marketing their school to, how do they access that virtual experience if they don't have a headset?
Okay, that's a great question. So the shortcut to experience this experience without the headset would be on the flat screen again. You get the YouTube 360 video, for example. It's okay. I don't like it, but it's there. It's a show and tell business. If you don't have the headset, you show them another way, and people tend to understand what you're talking about. Because then you in the video, instead of just sitting there and watching, you can actually use your mouse and start dragging the screen and watch on the right, watch to the left. So that's the first part. The other thing is, I truly believe that in any technology right now in this world, I don't care what it is, you always start with the top. So when I started in the industry as an intern, nobody had headsets. Nobody. Where do you actually get to experience this? Well, first of all, you need to sell to those huge multinationals your content. You say, okay, what you want to use this machine, this empathy machine to do your marketing, and then they'll be like, okay, let's try it, because they have the resources, because they have the technology, they have the people to be able to even experiment this technology. And then as they start to promote it on the streets, very locally, with a small population, obviously people queuing up to get into this, this shop where they can put the VR headset on and experience for the first time, whatever experience that is. And that gets people talking. And then as the technology gets better and cheaper, as it's happened, that's what I saw 6 years ago. I thought this is just only going to get better, and I want to get this technology to as many people's hands as possible. So I would be showing, there'll be a obvious lag between what's available, really available at the top end, and what's cost effective and practical for the mass market. And so I took advantage of that, and what I do is I take what's available at the cost, at the practicality side, to the school or whoever it is that wants to try this experience out at a small scale. So they would obviously not be investing yet the same amount of money into VR experience or the virtual tools as the normal video ads that they're doing, or they have been doing for the past 10, 20 years. But as I was mentioning, that with any technology, you just gotta have to convince the top people, the people who have the access and the resources, because they're the only people who can afford it. And once it's been tested out with these companies, whether it's from the provider, service provider side, or from the consumer side, then you work out all the problems that there are, all the challenges. And that's when people start talking about the Wi-Fi oh, yeah, I don't know, it's breaking up. It doesn't really work.
Basic
because it
stuff.
requires a lot of wire.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we've just had the same. We've just had the same issue just literally halfway through this recording, where my Wi-Fi, which is just pretty woeful in this part of the world, and it's there's basic requirements that sometimes you can't. If you can't access Wi-Fi, then how on earth are you going to access anything using a virtual reality headset? So yeah, I understand that.
100%. 100%. But I don't know, 20 years ago, would you say in Tunis you were even able to get onto the internet? I don't know. Like, I don't know anything about the country. But now you can. Like, you can have certain things that probably even 5 years ago you weren't able to access. But things are only going to trickle down. I really believe in the trickle down system. Not everybody believes in it. I do. In every, I believe Deseo VR is a company where we help people to understand the basic of technology, which is, okay, I know you as a client, you want the Hollywood 3D experience with the 3D audio, with the smell, with the touch and everything, but you're not going to have the resource to be able to do this, because this is for like the multinationals, like, and maybe even the multinationals don't have the access to this. So we're just gonna have to work with the limited resources that we have and try to maximize this resource as we can. And this takes creativity, because I heard one day, I don't know where exactly, on a podcast or something, where an artist was saying how, you need your freedom, but without limits, you cannot truly create something, because if it's like too unlimited kind of thing, then it makes no sense anymore. It's like you have all the money and resources in the world, and you can do whatever you want, then things kind of get meaningless, because you can actually do anything you want. So that limit is kind of a good thing sometimes, because it gets you creatively thinking, okay, so how do I make something as similar to the dream result that we want with the limited resource that we have? And that's what this Deseo VR does for schools, for real estate, or for hotels, because they really want to get access, to get their hands on this technology. Even though they can't get the best of the best of the best, they could at least try to experiment and already be ahead of the game, because once they've experimented it, they already know the process, and then they know how to improve for the next time. And then when people, when their competition start thinking about how to do a virtual tour or VR experience, they are already on top of the game. They are already thinking about how to improve the storytelling, not what equipment do I need. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I believe the trickle down system works. Mm-hmm.
But also, I think that as we've experienced, particularly in probably the last 2 or 3 years, and I think TikTok is a really good, and also Instagram, but probably more TikTok, a really good example of this. People are attracted to authenticity. They're not attracted to
100%.
high production values, glossy, slick, because it's meaningless. We've seen it, we've been there. And so actually, if you can create an immersive experience that's quite real, and I looked at your one of your videos from one of the school that you did, the boarding school, where you take a day in the life of the students. And what I really liked about that is you're literally sitting beside this girl where she's talking about her friends, and then in the dorm in the morning, and she's on the horseback ride and cycling, and it's just playing hockey, and it's just this kind of day in the life stuff. And it's not a particularly fancy looking school, and the dining hall's a bit, it's a little bit grim, but actually as a parent, I look at that and I think, I've got an insight. And I think just the fact that I was able, and again, I don't have a VR headset, so I was just, dragging the mouse over to look around the image. I noticed, I was just I was looking up and down and round, and I felt like I was sitting in the door. It kind of brought back memories. I ran a boarding house for many years in Switzerland, and I used to sit and eat with the girls every day, and it kind of brought back those memories. Really very nice, fond memories actually of sitting with the kids and just having a chat. And I think the fact that that allowed me to reconnect in with something from my past that I have fond memories of. I think that was an emotional connection, which I think is very, very powerful. I wouldn't have got that if I had just been watching a video. The fact I could literally physically almost look around the room that these kids were in having their lunch, or I could look around the scenery when the girl's on the horse doing a horseback riding, and look around all her friends playing hockey together. That I think is actually very, very powerful. But it has nothing to do with glossy, high production value. It's actually very, very real and very authentic. So I can understand how powerful that is. I guess the next question that logically leads on to that, and that this now sort of pushes the VR experience into the classroom. If you were advising a school as to how to invest, because, budget is a zero-sum game. If you invest money in one area, you don't invest it in another. And budgets are particularly tight. I mean, I know I run schools all over the world, and I'm always having to think very, very carefully about every single penny or dinar or dirham or rial or whatever country that I operate schools in. I have to be very, very careful. So how would you, if you were advising me as a manager of international schools, what would you suggest? Because I look at, the Oculus headset and I'm thinking, it's really expensive. I can't afford many of those. How could a school get into VR in a kind of cost-effective way, even if it's just dipping their toe into the water?
Exactly. So what I always tell clients is, what is your objective? Like, you have to start everything new with a very clear objective. So you ask yourself, what do you even want to use VR for? That's your first question. Okay, so you look, you know your school better than the provider. So you will have to go back and ask yourself as a headmaster or the marketing manager, what is it that you want to achieve with VR? Is it the marketing side? Is it the education side? Is it the HR side? From just one question, you already see that there are very clear different objectives that you could achieve potentially with one single tool, which is VR. It's very different if you want to use VR and train your staff. Let me give you an example. Maybe, Darren, you're telling me that there has been a lot of issues at your school with staff not understanding the teenagers' minds, and there's been like huge miscommunications between students and the teachers. That's an example. How can we improve this using VR? That way, we can start building steps towards solving this problem and working out whether VR is even the best solution for the school. Maybe it's not. If that's not the case, then I will advise the school to not use VR. That would be my true answer to my clients. It's like, okay, obviously it's all lovely and to have this great technology, but maybe it doesn't actually solve, one, it might not solve your problem. Secondly, maybe you don't have the resource to actually use this tool to solve the problem, and there are other tools that are better suited for the present situation for you. Now we can get past to the this test, and they say, oh no, we have budget, and VR seems to work for this situation, the HR situation. Then the next question is, how much do you have, and what resource what resources are you willing to invest into this? And I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about human resource as well, because we're talking about a new technology. So what any school would need is one or two people who are enthusiastic about the technology. They don't have to be an expert, but they need to at least have the interest. Otherwise, it won't work. Otherwise, you would introduce a technology, everyone will hype about it for the first day, and then in the next week, people would literally forget about this tool because we did not think about whether we can have some leaders in the other school who would push this technology. So you need that alliance between the marketing manager or the headmasters within the school to say, okay, so you've always talked to me about technology, Mr. whatever, whoever. I would like you to lead this project and help us push this further, so we can hopefully in the future roll this out as a bigger project. So that's another human resource. You need the people on your side, and then obviously test it. There's no other way than to actually do it. So we start small. We start small with the clients. Do one example, for example, virtual tools. So instead of doing 5, 10, 20 buildings of your school, I would say let's start with one school. Let's see how you as a client, me as a provider, work. How we can work. And then once we've done it, then we know we finished the project and we say, okay, if we were to roll this out to the other 6, 7 schools, what are the challenges that we faced and how can we improve it so then it could be faster, cheaper, and better?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be that would be the literal steps that I would take when selling this service to any client.
Okay, yeah.
What do you think?
I totally agree. I think you're absolutely right. I think there's possibly a step before that, in my experience, and having kind of not introduced VR, but other technologies like iPads into schools. And actually, I one of the books that I refer to so regularly when I talk about the leadership of change is John Cotter's Leading Change. Really great book. If I thoroughly recommend anyone to read it. The Bible for change management in any organization, not just in schools. And he actually talks about the first step in leading change is to establish a sense of urgency, in that you've got no choice. You need to bring this in. This is a technology, or this is a pedagogical technique, or whatever it is, an innovation that really you've got no choice. And I think we're fast reaching the point where, in order to engage students of most ages, we need to start looking at these technologies very seriously. And we'll come on towards the end of this discussion about AI, who, as you know, I'm very interested in and doing a bit of reading and research into at the moment. But I think that VR, AR, and AI as sort of the holy trinity, if you like. I think all of those in combination will be critically important as we move forward. So I think that, as well as establishing what you've actually referred to, which is what John Cotter calls the critical coalition, the group of individuals who will drive this forward. And it's not just leaders, it also needs to be teachers. There's also danger with having it too top down, with asking your deputy head. It's usually the keen young deputy who's like, you'll do it. And he'll be like, okay, or she'll do it. And they'll be like, yes, okay. And actually, you need teachers who are on the ground, getting their hands dirty, to be driving forward some of these changes. But before you get that coalition of people together, there needs to be a collective understanding that you don't really have a choice here. Because if you keep standing at the front of the classroom talking at students, scratching equations on a whiteboard, where these kids have these immersive experiences in their world. They're on Fortnite, They're in using an Oculus to be in Resident Evil. They're Final Fantasy or whatever the new games and the new experiences. They're doing esports. They're esports experts. They're YouTube and TikTok influencers. This is the lived reality of the children that we work with. If you don't shift your arse into gear, schools, then you're going to be left behind. And so I think that for me, that's, along with what you've just, absolutely agree with you, what you've just said, I think it's absolutely critical that schools very quickly establish this sense of urgency. We need to do something about this, because if we don't, we're in trouble. So I just think that, and then there are 8 steps, John Cotter, which I do really thoroughly recommend people reading. But the first one's the most important. Make sure people understand.
I guess. So from my studying experience, which was not long ago, in my business management studies, we always have case studies. So what I was thinking was, okay, so what businesses do to try and teach other leaders the urgency part. Okay, so here's McDonald's. This is what they tried to do. This is what they did in the end, and why did it work, or why did it not work, and let people discuss those kind of case studies. So it will be the same for education, maybe, where we start looking out for the successful people, obviously, but then those who have failed as well, those who, like, the schools who have failed to adapt, and use that as a case study to be like, look, this is what happened when a school did not adapt to technology. They kept going on and on with a blackboard. There might be like schools that are still using blackboard, and not adapting to the realities of the children, of the global environment, and that show and tell discussion, and I guess could generate more urgency, as you were mentioning, and for other schools to be like, okay, let's do something.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. I think there will be more and more of those in the future. Right now, because it's all so new, I think there are less of them. For me, the single biggest push factor is student behavior. In that, I think what will happen in the next few months or few years, we're already seeing it, post-COVID, we're already seeing a deterioration of student behavior. Lots and lots of teachers and educators are talking about this. It will get worse. Mm-hmm. And I think that will force schools to realise that actually they have to change their practice, because if they don't, they're going to lose their kids, because their kids are going to see little, if any, relevance in the system that they're part of. So I think the combination of all of those factors is going to, because it's about adapt or die, essentially. I think we're going to reach the stage very soon where it's going to be, it's not just about a gentle evolution. It will have to be a revolution, because if it's not, then the kids are just going to rebel, and they're just going to ignore us and just misbehave, quite frankly, or switch off and just passive.
They already do. They already do. They already do. So I'm not exactly. I'm not even a teacher, but I was working on a school in the first 2 years that I was in Spain, and I go into a public school, not a private school here in Spain, and you just think, how on earth does what kind of teacher teach in an environment where all the kids have phones on? Yeah, they are literally WhatsApping their friends in the classroom, or Snapchat or whatever. How on earth is anyone able to teach in this environment? And then we add on the AI and problems in the future.
Yeah,
like we won't even be able to get these kids into the classroom. They'll be like, I'm learning how to become an influencer at home. I don't need you. Exactly. That's the scary part, right? So maybe I even have a question for you. So private school have some kind of flexibility. What if you're a public school, and you really want to change because they have listened to our podcast, or they've joined one of our groups on LinkedIn, the Future of Education? How do you change when the government is not changing, or they don't give you the guidelines, they're not even talking about it? How do you change as a public school? I feel because the public school is where all the students are, the majority of the students are in public school. They're not in private school, they're in public school. So how would you advise them to start? Would be my question.
That's a good question. It's me now.
Yes.
So I think by public, obviously state funded. Anyone listening in the UK, a public school is a private school, though it's very confusing. But a state funded school. So if you're in a large state funded academy comprehensive school which is government funded, how do you change? Well, the first thing is learn. As you're a teacher, you learn as much as you possibly can about the technology right now, even if you know that you can't actually implement it in your practice on a day-to-day basis. Good example with GDPR, the data protection rules in the EU. It's very hard to use ChatGPT because actually there are big ring fences around how you can use data. So in lots of schools, like in the UK, for example, you can't really use ChatGPT. Or rather, the students themselves can't have their own account. There are ways in which you can just learn at the moment, so that at the right time you can start to apply it. Make sure you become as much of an expert as you possibly can. I think schools can start to use AI within the classroom, even if it's only in a very controlled way. So for example, the teacher could talk students through a problem on the whiteboard using ChatGPT. They could ask the AI questions, they could get ideas for brainstorming, for ideation, and then the kids can go away and they can just kind of do their own writing. And then if they use ChatGPT in their own time when they're at home, that's absolutely fine. You can't stop students. And of course, we know they are. We know they're using it. We know they're using it to write essays. We know they're doing all of these things. I think it's quite interesting that the New York State have just rolled back on their ban. They were back in December, the middle of December. Really? They banned ChatGPT statewide. They were the first state to do it. They've just rolled back because they recognize that it's impossible. They can't. They're actually putting their kids at a disadvantage so that they have to find other ways of working with. They can't ban it. It's, in a British expression, they shut the stable door once the horse has bolted. You can't do that. It's gone. That ship has sailed. I don't think you can roll back because you can't. So I think those teachers and those leaders in these schools, in these state-funded schools, first of all, you need to learn. Second thing, start small. Think about the small ways in which you can start to gently bring into the classroom, as I said, planning, etc. And then obviously getting excited, knocking my camera. Start to think about how you can enable students to use it in a controlled way for homework. You give them a very small controlled task. If they can't get access to ChatGPT, it's fine. There are more and more open source solutions, and there are solutions that are built on top of ChatGPT. There are ways. Perplexity AI, great tool. My 7-year-old loves Perplexity AI. I use it, and my 16-year-old daughter.
I didn't.
Yeah, but it's there are lots of these tools that are out there now. So you can start using it. Wholesale reform is going to be a problem for the government schools. And I won't go into it too much now because I've got lots of more questions that I want to ask you, and I don't want to dominate this conversation at all. But one thing I will say before we move on is I think there's going to be two things that happen. I think there's going to be a move from global to local, and I think there's going to be a move from centralization to decentralization. I think there's going to be a move from global control to localized control. And I think this is going to happen quite soon. I think there are going to be small schools that open up, like really small kind of, not big, huge state schools. And they're going to have that degree of control that, again, may even, like free schools in the UK, receive state funding when the state realizes that they can't shut that stable door. And I think also there's going to be moved from centralization to decentralization, that the storage of data, for example, centrally held data will move to being you will control your own personal data. So the notion of GDPR, I think, will become less of an issue, because I think particularly if you look at blockchain technology, I think there's going to be definitely a move towards every student having their own digital wallet, and that all of their data, 100%. Their learning, their progress, their welfare, it's all going to be held by their family, obviously, and then when they're 18, they take ownership of that digital wallet. So I think those two things will happen. How quickly, I'm not sure, but I think if literally the only thing that you can do if you're working in a state school, don't try and fight the system because you're going to fail, because the system is too big. It's bigger than you are. Just get up to speed. Learn now, because things are going to change in the next few years. And when they do, if you're ready, you can hugely take advantage of that. So look, there are a few more questions, and they're more kind of, there's just one practical question that I want to ask you, Polo, and then I want to go and maybe go a bit deeper into kind of some of the more sort of philosophical and psychological aspects of VR. I think one practical question, what I'm a school, what do I buy? Is there a particular, and I think both the capture and the viewing, because of course there are two technologies at play here. There's the technology that captures, and then there's the technology that views. So maybe just say a little bit about, if I had some money to spend on my budget, and I really want to do, I know it's important, and I'm gonna invest in this. Where should I be looking?
Okay, so the first one, you should be looking at me at Deseo VR. You can either outsource this so that I can solve the problem for you for a price, or, as you say, you could go and try and do it on your own, which is the fun part, if you have time, obviously.
Yeah.
There are tools out there, for example, for the capture side, as you were mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
The capture side, I can get a 360 camera. For example, Insta360 is a global known brand. It's a Chinese brand, and they're doing amazing things with the 360 camera. You can buy that for, the cheapest one right now is probably around £500, something like that.
Okay.
So that's the camera sorted.
Mm-hmm.
That's the camera sorted. And then, depending on what you want to do, if you want to capture a VR experience similar to the one that we do for schools, for example, showing how students actually have lunch at the dining hall, things like that, you would probably need to get a tripod, a nice, tripod that's it's not Hollywood level, but it does the job and it's stable enough so then nobody knocks it over, which is what, what you would need in this. You don't want people to accidentally touch it and it just falls down. Will cost you around £100, and then £100 to buy a tripod. And then with that, you literally, with any high-ish end smartphone, with the app, you'll be able to start playing around with it. And then if you need additional help, you get on YouTube or ChatGPT and ask, who are the influencers I should follow for this brand, Insta360, who are already capturing videos, etc. Who do you recommend me to follow and to learn from? And then they'll give you 5 names, and then you pick one, and then you just start watching the videos and learning the steps. That's it. That's the capture side. You need a phone, which everyone has a phone, the camera, and the tripod. Basic, sorted to start. And then you have the viewing. Now, the viewing, as we mentioned, you could literally go on YouTube. You can run a YouTube ad for your school, for example, where it's a 10-second 360 video of a sports activity, sports event that's very exciting, and it's very visual, and people are always shouting, and they're very excited. You can tell that there's energy in this video. You can capture that 10-second video with the 360 camera, and then make it into a YouTube ad where it appears on parents' screen in whichever country they're in that you're targeting, and they'll be like, oh, this is different. And that could get, this could be the first step to using this technology for marketing. Or if you want to go one step further, you either buy the VR headsets and send it to the agents that you have around the world, the recruitment agents, and say, okay, so I've prepared 10 VR experiences of the day-to-day of our school. It's very authentic and, basic edition with a bit of music in the background. Here's a headset. Please, when you show our school to whichever student in the future, can you please use this content so then they understand what it's like to eat at a dining room, what's a dorm room like, or what's a Saturday like at our school. And that could work. And the VR headset, the cheapest and the best headsets are the the Meta Quest 2 or the Pico. They're around £500, something like that, depending on the add-ons that you want to have, and obviously the country you live in. So, around £1,000, something like that, you can pretty much get something started.
Yeah.
And I believe most schools have that resource.
For a one-off, I agree. I think when it comes to a class set, 15, for example, headsets, if you wanted one between two, if you have a class of 30, then that becomes much more challenging. So what I would expect to see, and I know we've had this conversation before, is I would expect to see the cost come down considerably to maybe £100 to £150 per headset. And at that point, then I think it starts to become viable as a tool for teaching within a state-funded public school. I think at the moment it's still quite challenging. I guess the single biggest barrier to entry compared to ChatGPT, which is free, is the fact that VR is still to capture and then to actually view. VR is still quite expensive. So I think I would imagine that you will find yourself in your own business that things will accelerate quite quickly. And that's not something you can do anything about. There's nothing that you can technically do, personally do, to change the cost of these devices. All you can do is hope that they come down in price quite soon.
I advise schools to have their own maybe VR labs or AI labs, whatever that is, to where they can do experiments. But I remember when I was in primary school in Hong Kong, we have IT rooms where you're not going to get Wi-Fi in the whole school. You go to the IT room to get access to the internet once in a while. Or even when I was in England, and when I was 11, maybe 12, and I had to go to the IT room to do MSN. I don't know if you remember the Microsoft, the Messenger. I had to go there, or ICQ. I don't know if you know that one. You had to go to the IT room for that, obviously, because there's only 10 computers shared by 1,000 students, 500, however many students you have at school. So it would be the same for VR, because that back in the day, the computers would cost £1,000 as well. So why can't it be the same for VR? You get 5 headsets instead of 50. You get 5, and you allow the freedom for your teachers and your students to be able to at least pick that up and experiment for themselves. To say, oh wow, now I see the possibilities. Then people will start moving. You influence people through showing. So people will start thinking, okay, so how can we push this technology in the education side? How can we, and as a marketing manager, maybe you say, how can we push this in the marketing side of things? So that's how we can make small but significant steps towards the end goal, which there's no end goal because it's always going to improve, is to start small. Which every school, I believe, can start small. I even tell school leaders like yourself, I say, okay, you don't want to hire me to do your thing? Fine. I can actually show you. I can walk you through these steps to save you time, having to ask ChatGPT and maybe, have to make 10 mistakes and then do it. I just show you the steps. That's okay. That's okay. You don't have to. I don't have to do the full job, but I can encourage you to try for yourself as well. And that's my mission. And Deseo VR's mission is to be able to get this technology into as many people's hands as possible. So as long as it aligns with his philosophy, with his vision, then there's no reason why you can't start, as long as you are demanding it. So what I look for, I am the service provider, but I look for things in at a client level as well. I'm like, okay, so they're telling me this, but then I don't see that much push from them, then I'm not going to waste time. At the end of the day, I have my things to do. I have my 24 hours. I have my things to improve on. So if you're really interested, Darren, for example, I can say, okay, how can we start? Okay, so these are the equipment they can buy. Go and do it yourself.
Yeah.
Cool. You need extra help. Maybe I charge you a small fee for this meeting, and then I do a quick tutorial. Save you 10 hours of work. Great.
Yeah.
Deal.
Yeah.
So there's always ways to work around the challenges, the technological challenges, the government challenges that we're facing day to day.
One of that's very, very helpful, and actually having people like you who are able to offer different types of service, specialism, support, I think for a lot of schools would be very, very, very attractive. One of the major stakeholders in any change process in a school are parents. And often, and I've seen this myself I was one of the first to bring iPads into schools way back in 2011. It's like a long time ago. The iPad was only just been released a few months previously, and we were getting it into schools. I look back and I think, why did I do that? It was mad. But one of the biggest challenges that we had are parents saying, really, more screen time? My kid gets enough. What would you say to schools as to how to bring in these new technologies, which do involve more looking at a screen, whether they be staring at a screen on their iPhone or wearing a headset? Yeah. How can they tackle that so that parents can feel reassured that this is a real value add, that this is not just more kind of, brain dead staring at a screen?
It has to start with the teachers. I think the educators, they have to filter out the noise first of all, because with new technology you get many options, and then and really focus on particular tasks, whatever subject that you're teaching, and start introducing that little by little, and see and make parents see that the kids react very well to this technology. Obviously, you have to prepare for it, and you have to make some mistakes. But as the iPad example, like you don't replace suddenly everything that you were doing on the whiteboard to the iPad. You start with small tasks, and then once you know what works and what doesn't, you could bring the parents in.
Yeah,
why not? Like literally bring the parents in and make them be the observer of the classroom one day, like an open day almost, and let them see that the students are not spending, I don't know, 8 hours on the VR headset, for example, playing games. That's not what they're doing. They are, for example, as you say, okay, so the teacher starts with a debate using ChatGPT, this debate, and then from this debate, they say, okay, now let's go into VR where we get to see a particular battle in 1505, and see what actually happened. And that'll be like a 10-minute session, and the kids go absolutely berserk, and they're like, oh, wow. And they start mentioning names of this battle, and they start, talking about it, and then they link it with a debate that was generated from the beginning of the lesson, and it becomes a discussion, deep discussion about what happened in that. And then the parents would see that, oh, okay, I understand. Like, they're not just with a headset and like doing nothing. The VR headset is an added value, because it's no longer, okay, here's a debate. Please everyone, shut up, silence, lights off. Watch the what's it called, the projector.
Yeah.
Let's see what was it, and then people are like, cool, great. But no, now it's let's get into the battle. let's see what General X did at this battle and why did he win this battle, etc., etc., etc.
I think that you've used the word several times whenever you're talking about this sort of immersive experience, and you use the word wow a lot, and I think that's
The wow
key.
factor.
The wow factor is key, and I think that not only can you engage the students in that, like, oh my goodness me, I'm looking around and I'm actually here, and I'm in the environment, and there's stuff going on around me, and this is kind of crazy, which they can do with if they're using a MetaQuest and they're in a video game, they're doing that. But then all of a sudden they're doing it in the class, and it feels a little bit like, I really should I be doing this kind of thing? But also for parents, and I think one of the things that schools can do is just bring parents in, get them to put one of these headsets on, get them to experience.
Exactly.
Get the parents to experience. Because what you want to do is you want the parents to experience the wow. Because as soon as you do that, then they're like, yeah, okay, do you know what? I can see value in this, because it might not necessarily teach you any more than watching a video. You might not learn in that 5-minute experience, but what it will do is it will engage you into the process. It will engage you into the actual world that you're exploring. And the learning that can then come out of that can be very rich and very deep. Now, I think actually VR and AR and the metaverse can have enormous potential, and I think it will have enormous potential it's had less of an impact than maybe we were expecting a few years ago when Mark Zuckerberg launched Meta, and he launched his own metaverse, and that hasn't really worked. Kind of understand why. It's pretty clunky and not very interesting, quite frankly. And a lot of these other a lot of these meta, like Decentraland, there were a number that came out on the back of crypto 2 or 3 years ago. They haven't really taken off, but I do think in future that will not be the case. I think they will become more and more immersive and more real and more kind of engaging. And so I think that the wow that's the key, because the more you can tap into a student and a parent's wow the factor, that's when you hook them into the learning process, and they're bought in and they're listening to you and they're kind of engaged. Whatever you do that follows that initial hook, they're more likely to be with you.
100%. And it doesn't cost anything to get a parent to try that for the first time for 1 minute, 2 minutes. They don't even need full experience. As I told you, like, I put on that headset for the first time and I was already shocked.
Yeah.
Within the first second, I was like, wow, this is crazy. This is the future. And apart from, like, I built the whole business. My whole life has been this for the past 6 years because of this. So imagine, parents would have wished, you asked them the question, you would have wished that you had this when you were studying history on geography or maths when you were at school, right? And then they were like, yeah, of course. And they will wish that for the kids. Yeah. They will not wish their kids to be facing textbooks and boring lectures. And that's just not how the trend is going, because kids have the attention span of 0. Like, so there's no way you can sit them down anymore and just tell. No, you need to get them involved. And what's a better way to get them on the iPads, on the VR headset, and play around? So maybe Monday's lesson is just with iPads. Wednesday lesson, we get to go to the VR labs where we get to experience the Battle of Hastings or whatever that is, interact a little bit with it, and then we'll go back to the classroom and we'll have a huge discussion using ChatGPT. Or you say, okay, so we want you as the students to experience this and to think about the questions that you want to ask during this debate, the grand debates, every end of the week. And then you get to Friday, and instead of having another boring teacher telling you all about the history of this, you say, okay, students, so from this VR experience that you had, what sort of questions got into your mind about what happened? And it will be a completely different type of discussion and engagement with the students. So that's how I see it anyway. Who knows?
I think that going full circle right the way back to the start of this conversation, you mentioned about empathy and about how it's kind of can generate and drive empathy, and I think particularly for a subject like history, a really good example. I think being in the space in the historical moment, actually that can generate an empathy which can connect you into that subject and that topic in a way that you're never ever going to get from a
100%.
textbook. So we talk a lot about VR and we talk about the VR experiences, and I think a lot of the time people maybe conflate, or maybe they kind of see the VR and the metaverse as going hand in hand. And I'm quite keen to get your take on that. As we develop VR and as we develop virtual and augmented realities, will we see in education actually more implementation of the metaverse in our schools?
Yes. So first of all, I would like to say that I believe that most people are very confused about the metaverse and VR because literally they are two separate things. I don't know whose fault is it. Maybe it's Mark Zuckerberg's fault. But it's VR existed when we weren't talking about the metaverse. When I first started, nobody was talking about the metaverse. We were just talking about VR as its individual technology.
Yeah.
And now, 1 year ago, literally, because of blockchain, because of Decentraland, people started talking about the metaverse. But they're actually two separate entities. Metaverse exists. It can exist perfectly without VR. What VR does, as I mentioned from the definition at the beginning of the podcast, is that it's a visual tool. It's a communication tool. It's the hardware that allows you to access a virtual world. And one of these virtual worlds could be the metaverse. Why I say that is because, for example, we're watching a VR experience of being in Barcelona, of a trip in Barcelona. That has nothing to do with the metaverse. That's just another, like a separate case, but you're using VR. So now you can see that there's a complete different thing. They're two different separate things. So when we talk about whether this is going to be in an important thing in education, we have to treat it as two separate entities, and then you combine it at a later stage because they're two separate technologies. Metaverse is definitely not dead because everyone is on Fortnite, everyone is on GTA, everyone is on Roblox. I'm talking about little kids.
Yeah.
And they are the ones who are at school. So that's not dead. That's growing. That's only going to get better with the introduction of VR and AR and AI and blockchain. My vision, this might not happen. My vision, because of how I see some metaverse, they haven't been working, or VR has not been working in some cases, is probably because they haven't been focusing on one sector. It's as simple as that. So we have the prime example of this Decentraland, where at the beginning, everyone goes into this Decentraland and they talk with strangers. And I don't even know what they were doing, selling virtual real estates and NFTs. But really, there's no reason for a normal person to be there. It's what do I do there? I've tried 3, 5, 10 times going to Decentraland, and I found absolutely no purpose.
Yeah, I agree.
So I believe that's why there's no active users. Whereas you go to Fortnite, there's one objective. You go there to kill virtual avatars. You kill each other basically in this virtual world. That's the objective. And then the rest, when they introduce a huge Travis Scott concert, that's an extra. That's a VIP one-time event, punctual event. And then people are like, oh wow, they start talking about it. Great. It's working because they have one clear objective, day-to-day objective that brings in a huge audience together. So what I would see in the next 1 year, actually, in the next 1 to 5 years, is that more of these metaverses will become more niche orientated. So Decentraland, I see it as more of a fashion. They're really going into the fashion world. They're attracting the virtual catwalks, that kind of thing. And then you will have 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 players where they're highly focused on education. And then all these worlds will be compatible with your computer because they know everyone has a computer, everyone has a tablet, everyone has a mobile phone. And that's the only way to get everyone within the same objective, which is to learn, for example, in this case, in education. And then VR will be part of it, will be the extended part of it. The richer school, they will have 15 headsets in the VR lab. The state schools, they might have 4. But anyways, everybody has access to this. And then as the technology, the VR technology, the AR technology, as the cost gets lowered and the quality actually gets better, then slowly, maybe one day it will not replace, but it will add on to the time that we usually use a computer or our phone. We might have to spare 15% of that time using VR headset instead for certain things. That's how I see the future coming. So people going very niche, technologies leaders going really niche with the metaverse and the VR technology, and eventually it will become a core part of the curriculum or the system. That's how I see it.
No, I think I agree with you. I think it will definitely become more mainstream. I think more and more schools will be using it because they'll have to, because they'll really have no choice, particularly any private schools, just to remain competitive, because it is, at the end of the day, it's a market. Not just private schools, state schools as well. I think there's a degree of competitiveness even in the state-funded system. So I think regardless of the school that you're in, it is definitely something that you have to take really quite seriously. One other question, I suppose it's maybe a concern that some people have.
Yeah.
And it goes back to one of the things that you mentioned very early on when you were playing the zombie game, or whether it was Resident Evil or whatever the kind of games are, that these VR games. And you said just how immersive it was and just how like the wow, it was like, I can't believe, and I'm looking around, there's zombies jumping outside, jumping from behind doors and what have you. And they're right behind me and that kind of thing. It kind of freaks you out. That, for me personally, I really struggled with. I played Resident Evil with a PS2. That's how old I am. No, it's the PS1.
I had a PS2.
No, it's the PS1.
I have that as well.
Yeah. So this was way back in this. I'll tell you what. This was in 1998, 1999, and I was just starting to teach, and I was living with a guy. We were doing our teaching practice, and he had a PlayStation. We used to come home from school and play Resident Evil and Call of Duty. Resident Evil and Tomb Raider, and I remember being kind of freaked out by it. So, and because I'm very visual very visual learner, and so I'm very affected by visuals, like significantly affected by visuals. My brain tends to go kind of crazy if I'm overstimulated in that way, and so it kind of, I struggle with it. And I don't game, I don't video game. I've tried, and actually I find it too addictive, and as a result I've made the decision not to. I remember getting immersed in Call of Duty and losing days at a time. I can't do this. So the reason I'm saying all this, putting it into my own context, is that I'm a parent, I've got kids. My worry is that where is the boundary? Will the boundary become reality and virtual reality start to blur together? Is there a danger that the more immersive and the more realistic, and if I look at what's coming out now with these new video games and just how lifelike they are, and AR is only going to make them more lifelike. Is there not a danger that kids, impressionable young minds, we know that the human brain doesn't fully develop. Girl, it's 18 or 19, a boy, it's like 20 or 21. Like the brain fully developed takes till a kind of the late teens, early 20s. So as the brain chemistry and the connections and the synapses are actually forming and being pruned, etc., is there not a danger that by essentially the adult world imposing these structures on children that were actually going to be impacting on their brain chemistry in ways which is through VR and AR, but also through the metaverse, that we start to blur reality and fiction, reality and virtual reality, and actually could have a detrimental effect on children's development.
100%. I 100% agree that there is a danger. I 100% agree that there could be a blurring, or there already is a blurring between what's real and what's not. We've seen it in the social media field, where people don't understand, for example, bullying, commenting on people's posts in a mean manner is the same as you doing that face to face almost with the person, and maybe worse, because there's no tone, there's no body language, so the other person don't even understand whether you are violently attacking them or just being mean. Or so you already see that in the social media world. I believe the difference between the social media world and what we're facing with VR and AI right now, and how we can hopefully learn from the history from the past, is that we are not going to throw them in without the guidance.
Yeah.
So I believe, because there are leaders like us, like the group chats that we're in, who already see that there's a problem with this. We are going to help, hopefully, the wider sector to not only drive conversations, but already develop guidelines, very clear, easy to understand guidelines, and maybe even laws that can be introduced to schools, so that we know already from experiments, those little experiments that we've been doing at smaller levels, that we know on a bigger scale it will have a very similar impact, what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
So that gives them peace that this will happen. When it gets to the crazy part, where the simulation, the matrix, that the people are calling it, that I don't know. I don't know what's the real answer or solution to it.
Yeah.
But I say, if we do take steps right now, before it's too late, I would say, into guiding schools, parents, students to have these ethical conversations as to, for example, instead of just give you a headset, do the thing, before you do the thing, you have these introductory guidelines and say, okay, so ask yourself, students, when you verbally abuse somebody in the virtual world, how does the other person feel? Or what are the consequences? And generate debates around little things like this, and then you start talking deeper into violence, into maybe even virtual sexual abuse, or whatever it is. And then you generate that debate, so then they're conscious. So the children, I think the most important part is for children to understand what's real and what's not real. I feel like the biggest problem with screen time and social media right now is that many parents have introduced the phone and the internet to their children at an age that's 100% not acceptable. Basically, at the age of 1, you see, or 2, you see kids with their iPads watching whatever it is they're watching, and you think there should be a law against this. Almost, there should be a law where you say the headset VR element can only be introduced at a certain age. It's the same. Pornography cannot be in certain place. The same. There should be laws. So what some people are saying is that there should be, you do the things in virtually, but there should be real life implications, consequences, whether they are guidelines or
Yeah.
laws, direct consequences. If you do X in the virtual world, you will have real life consequence, prison time, I don't know, whatever it is. Even if it's not the government, it could be the school. You have to introduce these laws before you start implementing this technology. You know, if you are mean to your friends during this class in VR, your break time is gone. It will cancel your break time. Things like that. So then people know that, okay, there's real life consequences for the things that I do in the virtual world.
I think
no
right.
longer like
I think
the social media.
There needs to be, there are a couple of things that you're kind of referring to there. There's the sense that there is a separation, in that there's a physical separation between the real world, the world as we live, and there's the virtual world. But actually, the virtual world and the real world simply can't be fully separated. That what you do in the virtual world will have an impact on the real world, and the reason it will have an impact on the real world is because, again, going right the way back to the beginning, is the emotional element to being immersed in these worlds. Whether it be social media as it has been, and whether it then becomes kind of, bullying, virtual bullying, where you're literally, in the metaverse and you're bullying someone in the metaverse, doesn't actually matter. Because if you make someone feel bad about themselves, if you make someone feel bad about how they look and their gender or their lack of friends or their body image or whatever, it doesn't matter. Where you do it, it's irrelevant. The fact is you're actually impact on someone's emotional world and emotional health, and therefore there's an impact to that. So I think you're right. I think the thing that we have to remind ourselves here in all of this, we brought this into these children's lives. Yeah, they didn't choose to have mobile phones. They didn't. I mean, they'll badger and bully their parents into, because all of their friends have got them, but we grew up, I grew up in the 1970s and the 1980s. I didn't have anything. I mean, the internet didn't exist till the early 90s. I mean, I went through all the way through school. We had BBC B computers. I didn't have a computer. Nothing. Throughout my entire childhood, the internet didn't exist. So I wanted a BMX bike when I was a kid, for goodness sake. I mean, that was like the height of my expectation as I was growing up. It's very different.
That's cool.
So the reality of these children's lives is very different from our own when we grew up. They didn't choose that. It's not their fault if we're going to I don't want this to turn negative, but I mean this in the kind of, it's not their fault that they have that there are phones in the world. They didn't invent them, but it's absolutely our responsibility to make sure that we have the guardrails, that we have the education, that we have the oversight. And it might not necessarily be banning or having kind of some, because the laws are almost impossible to hold internationally. It just doesn't work. I mean, one country can ban, but then there are VPNs, and you look at China, you can just get around these things through VPNs. So actually banning stuff on in a virtual world just doesn't work. But you have to educate, and you have to teach, and you have to educate everyone. Parents need to be educated. And I think the school's responsibility needs to face more and more out into the community. It's not just about educating the children, it's also educating parents and the local communities as to how to use these tools safely. So I think that's where we need to be very, we are going to have a blurring of virtual, and we already are, we already are.
We already have.
We're already part cyborg anyway. I mean, we've all got these things wedded to ourselves. I mean, there's been studies done of kids who have had these things taken away, and it makes them feel physically sick to have their mobile devices, it's a physical reaction. This is not just kind of some tool that they use to communicate with friends. This is physically attached in their brain chemistry. That's on us. That's on us. We did that.
100%.
The adult world, we did that. Steve Jobs did it. Bill Gates did it. Mark Zuckerberg did it. We, the adult world, mainly men in their 50s, like I am, we did this. So we have a responsibility to make sure that we look after the children in our care, and they are in our care, to make sure they can use these tools for their benefit and their advantage, not to further erode their ability to socialize and their ability to form friendships, and being locked in their rooms and kind of being completely cut off from reality, as so many kids are nowadays. We have a responsibility, and I think that's where we have to make sure that we're not looking the other way and saying, oh, these kids today, da-da-da-da-da. No, it's on us. It's let's do something about it.
100%. I feel like when I was at school, like there was zero, there wasn't even one class that taught us anything about the good use and bad use of social media,
Yeah.
internet. Zero. I don't remember one single lesson. And we had religion lesson. We had maybe, what was it called? Citizenship. So they were talking about helping out communities, blah 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 blah. But there was no one lesson that said, okay, so we have this amazing technology that's gonna literally change the world. What are the implications that we should be discussing right now? So then when you're 18, you're not addicted to your phone, or you don't over rely on it, or you know what not to do with it, or what other people can do, might be the bad actors and be able to do something bad to you. You need to know this thing. And there was a zero concern. I believe that was the real problem. They introduced the technology and there was zero discussion about any implication. Zero. Like, not even a bit. It was zero. I don't know anybody who had that lesson where just one, you don't only need one or two or three introductionary, look, this is a great technology, blah, 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 but be careful with it.
Yeah.
You cannot stop it, but as soon as people are aware, they'll think twice about what they do in whatever field they do. So that's what we need to do with VR, with AI, with AR. Before we massively introduce something, we really need to talk about this before.
I think you're right, and this is the time to do it. I think schools almost need to be turning their attention more to the ethics and the morality than actually the technical side. The technical side is not hard. It takes you 5 minutes to learn how to use ChatGPT. So actually, as experts, as expert educators, actually more of our attention needs to go, particularly in leadership positions, on the ethics of using these tools and the kind of the implications of using them. So, I mean, I've been working with, Tom from Cottesmore, and we've been working together on a policy. So we're looking at the moment in crafting a policy for the acceptable use of AI in schools, and we'll get that released very soon, actually. So for people to comment on, it's just a working draft. It's certainly not set in stone, but I think it's important that we start having that conversation. How should we be introducing AI? What are the implications for privacy, for data protection, for managing your identity, and so on and so forth, for AR, for VR, and for AI? That will happen.
How many pages? How many pages is it?
It's about 20. I mean, it's not. It's quite meaty. I mean, it's quite in depth. I mean, it does go into a lot of depth. So, and we'll
but you just tell the readers to get on ChatGPT for a summary, and then I'm sure everyone can do that. Like, no, absolutely. Summarize. They'll be like, so yeah, there's no reason why they shouldn't be reading it, because the first thing they will say is, we don't have time. Too much bureaucracy. We don't have that.
You have to make time. You have to make time. This is the single most important thing. So there are two things schools have to do right now. The first, they have to understand how these things work. We are seeing so many examples of teachers who are failing whole classes worth of kids because they think that because they've copy pasted an essay into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT has said, I wrote it. Do you know what? ChatGPT will always say it wrote. It's completely, so you're just misusing a tool. And actually, you're totally destroying the trust between the teacher and the student as a result. And that, once you've lost that, as a teacher, once you've lost the trust of your class, you'll never get it back, because they'll just think, you know what, you didn't trust me. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to give a damn about you. I don't rate you as a teacher. You've lost. You may as well just literally give up and leave and go to a different school if you do that. And I'm not kidding you. It's that fundamental. Trust is that fundamental when it comes to education. So we were already seeing teachers who just don't understand. So it's up to schools to make sure these teachers really, really do understand. Number one. Number two, they have to understand the ethics, and they have to understand the morality, and they have to understand the implications on identity and data protection, et cetera, et cetera. Those two things have to be done. Look, I want to finish just with one last question, because I mean, I could literally talk to you for days on this, and I want to make sure we're going to stick within about 90 minutes. Paint me a picture of, in the next 3 to 5 years or 10 years or whatever, when AR is fully integrated, when VR is fully integrated, and and AR. We've not talked much about augmented reality, and I'm kind of seeing them going hand in hand, VR and AR. But these alternate realities, maybe also the metaverse. What do you think is going to happen in the next sort of 3 to 5 years? What's your prediction? Because that's happening so quickly and it's accelerating so fast. How do you think the world of the school is going to change in the next few years?
I believe that, first of all, AI is going to take over. AI is literally like, this is the number one technology. It will be the leader. It will be the leader that accelerates the advancement of the other technologies that we mentioned. That's number one. And with that, hopefully, things will get cheaper, more accessible, more practical, better resolution, better everything, quality. And then what we will see, I believe, maybe government may not even want this. We might actually see more things like homeschooling, virtual online schools, where, okay, so I don't believe in the education here in Spain, and I want my children to be able to go to a British school in England, not even a British school in Spain, like a proper British school in England. And the only way to do this is to get my kids into a VR headset. I think people would do it. I think people would do it if it's properly structured, there's a good system, and there will be some leaders. I don't think everyone would do it yet, but I think school will, as you say, become more decentralized. So there will be reasons why people want to go to school, but there will be a lot of people that might stop going to school. I even though it's illegal in all countries almost, I think there will be a push, a revolution to say, well, why the hell are we in school? Like, for those who are fortunate enough to work at home as a parent, maybe they do online work, and then the kids can do online school. So it's not a problem that obviously a minor being at home. If they have the alternative, why the hell are they going to school? Like here, in physically, if they are not adding any value to. So I think that there could be a revolution. And maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's a good thing on the government, because then maybe they can start spending less on mass education and start thinking about how can they go more niche and hyper focus on what, and start redefining what school is actually for certain people. Not everyone, but for certain people. I believe that's a good thing. That there should be a revolution to absolutely break the system. Not every country, because there are some countries that actually, the public system works really well. But countries like Spain, it's awful. Like there's literally everything is broken. Like from the teacher part to the parent part to the actual studying part. And I feel like there has to be a revolution to be able to say, let's start from zero again. Let's just kill the system and do a rebuild from scratch, and just redefine what it really means to be at school. So that could be. I don't know. That could be it. That could be it. That could be it.
I think that just to pick up on a couple of things there, and slightly kind of drill down into them in a bit more depth. The notion of being able to access any curriculum anywhere in the world and any quality of teacher anywhere in the world, that will happen, no doubt. And what will happen is there will become teachers who are very, very good at what they do, who will be extremely well paid, and they will be teaching maybe 1,000 kids, both synchronously and asynchronously. They'll be recording content which is really engaging and really interesting. Maybe in virtual, AR classrooms where you'll put on a VR and AR headset and you'll see other kids in the classroom. You could be in Nairobi, you could be in Kigali, you could be in Mozambique, you could be in... It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You can access this quality of inspiring teachers and inspiring learning content and so on and so forth. I think there'll be a huge move towards project-based learning finally, because I think that one of the things that AR and VR and AI will do is it will finally free kids up to learn the problem with project-based learning is that sometimes if you need to know something, you might not be able to find it, and then the learning can sometimes be a little bit shallow. Actually, with AI, but then also augmented with these other technologies, you can learn what you need quite quickly at the moment you need it. So I think that we'll move towards inquiry and project-based learning far more. But I think one of the things that one of the challenges that we found through COVID with home education is kids were lonely. Yeah, people need people. Yeah, and it's about, maybe they have siblings, maybe they got their mum and dad, but they miss their friends. And so what I can see happening in the next few years is actually we have almost a new type of, and we're not even going to call it a school, almost like hubs, community hubs, where kids can go and they can learn together, and they can learn in project-based learning, but also they could potentially be going into learn the British curriculum or the US curriculum or the IB curriculum, but they're all in the same space. So they'll go into a communal space and they'll learn what they need to learn to go to a US university or a UK university, or to become an entrepreneur or create content to be an influencer, whatever it is. Because universities, I think, will no longer be the default. Firmly believe that. I think the university should be the most scared any of the institutions right now in education, because they're the ones that stand to be most disrupted, because kids will think, I can learn everything I need online, virtually, through VR or AR and AI. Why do I need to go to university? I'm going to go and do an apprenticeship. I'm going to become an influencer. I'm going to create content or become an entrepreneur, whatever it is. So I think what I can see is the spaces within which we all learn will change radically in the next few years. And I think that's really exciting, because I think the days of the kind of box filled with boxes school system, I think they are numbered. I think there'll always be a place for humans and teachers. I really feel very passionately about this. The experiments that have been done with, the work that was done with the alt school movement, which just hasn't worked, just didn't work. In the end, they actually ended that project. I think it's been taken up by one or two countries in Africa. I think Nigeria is one of them, but generally it hasn't worked. And it's now just become a software company. It's not even called alt school anymore. The reason it didn't work is because kids need they need inspiring adults. They need people like
They need
us.
to go into school. They need to go into school. They need to go into school and interact.
They need to go into a space, not necessarily school. They need to go into a space to interact with other children, to learn how to socialize, to collaborate, to get on with each other. Because at the end of the day, those human skills are going to be more and more important the more we have AI.
Maybe there will be more sports. Maybe there will be more sports.
Exactly.
Maybe there will be more activity.
More sports.
They'll have fun.
More creative pursuits, more drama, more arts, more debating. So actually, schools will become much more like that. So I think that's the way I think things will move in the next few years. But I do think, to go all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, that AR and VR are going to be a really important part of that, because what it does is it flattens the whole playing field in terms of the sharing of expertise, that a child will have access to an expert who could be teaching in a entirely different part of the world, time zone permitting, and they will be able to have that emotional connection because they will be in the space with that person. So I think that's why, for me, VR will be very important. I think that, what you're doing is great. I think keep doing it. I think the more you can be bringing your expertise into schools right now, I think the better. And what I'll do, obviously, I'll put for people watching and listening in, if you've managed to last this long, well done. I'll put all the information, you're in the notes, so people will be able to kind of contact you. But look, Polo, thank you. It's been a huge, real pleasure and absolutely fascinating discussion. Really looking forward to seeing where you go with your business and your ideas. And let's keep talking.
Thank you so much, Darren, for inviting me onto this podcast. It's been a pleasure to share my knowledge and yes, for me, human interaction as well too. Yeah. Sometimes building a business is lonely. Being an entrepreneur is alone. Yeah. So being able to share the ideas out loud with people with different perspectives, or the same perspectives, it's very important. So yeah. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Polo.